to myself. You'll see yourself. So there's the link.
Cool. It's arriving now. Got it. Clicking on it.
Perfect. Right, and I'm going to sort out the thumbnail because
Cool.
unfortunately it doesn't let me do this.
Muted. Okay.
Muted. Perfect. Right, so I'm going to get the new thumbnail up. Yeah, it's a bit of a pain in the bum, this, like, because remember last time we did it? It was one-on-one. Now they have this new thing where only I can go live via YouTube and not with a guest, which is really strange. Right, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to send the link out to everybody. Bear with us, folks, if you're joining us at the moment. Mute. Right, I'm going to send that over to myself.
All right, I'm just going to check the chat window's working.
Perfect.
That seems to work.
Let's put a little comment in there, just make sure everything's coming in, and let's see if I can get this out to social media. Right. So what are you drinking, Foo?
Well, starting off with a very, very nice cup of coffee. I've just had my dinner. And then just in case my voice starts to get a bit hoarse, I have myself a large cognac on alert 5. Just in case. 5. Yeah.
Good.
But coffee first.
Coffee first, yeah. Do you have a machine or is it instant?
Which mess did you think I used to sleep in?
Yeah, that's true.
A few years ago, my long-suffering wife bought me a brilliant Christmas present, which was a very, very nice Sage bean-to-cup semi-professional machine.
Oh,
and it has become, over the last 3 years, it's become like a car, where if it breaks, you just know you're going to have to find the money to go and replace it instantly. Because we've got Nespresso machines that just sit there idle.
Really?
Because this thing is so good. You just buy coffee, you pour a big hopper on the top, set it all up for nuclear strength coffee. And it's not just me. I mean, the kids go nuts for it as well. My son hates it when he goes to university because he's separated from it. He gets separation anxiety from the coffee machine, not from the dogs.
Bless him, yeah.
Or any of the rest of his family.
Back to pasta and instant coffee, I guess.
Yeah, instant coffee reminds me of too many field exercises. Shitting coffee most of the time as well. MRE coffee, our ration pack coffee, dreadful. You do what you can, but yes, given the choice, instant, no.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm a bit of a kind of a coffee snob, but probably not to your level. So bear with me here, guys.
I'm we it's get to the stage now where a bit like cigars, I keep a tag of the coffee beans that I buy that I really like.
All right.
So I tend to buy the same coffee beans. I'll try different ones every now and then and find one I really like. We buy some we import from Spain at the moment, which are just fabulous.
Oh, bloody hell. Posh?
It's not that posh, but it's just nice.
Yeah, I used to because when my parents lived in Malaysia, we used to get local Indonesian beans and stuff like that, and it was
that's
so
the
cheap.
beans that feed through monkeys and stuff. Well, that's Madagascar, isn't it?
That's Madagascar. Close enough. But they were absolutely lovely. So bear with me here, folks, while we get these out to social media. As you know, it's a bit of a pain with this third-party thing we have to do at the moment.
Yeah, that's life.
Did you manage to get your phone call sorted?
45 minutes. She answered finally, and then I was on the phone for about 5 minutes to her. She put me on hold for 20 minutes, came back and didn't answer the question, and then we lost the link. So I've got to try again tomorrow.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, which is just it's an hour out of your life, really. But I'm hoping that we'll get there at some stage.
You'll get there.
It's not all money, it's just annoying, that's all.
Yeah, of course. Right. So let me get set up here. Hiya, Harry, in the comments there. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Harry.
I'm guessing you know him.
No, just being polite.
Just being polite. Right.
Manners cost nothing.
Exactly. Right, I think we're almost there. Like, right, it's out on Instagram now. It's on Twitter. And it's now out on Facebook. Right, okay, because we were a bit early, guys, so we're gonna get going soon. But yeah, Paul, so we've been, I mean, I can't even remember the last time we had the Q&A. It must have been, was it last year? I can't even remember.
A while ago, wasn't it? Because it was before we did the, was it before or after we did the happy hour?
I think it was after. I think.
Was it?
I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's been a while though.
It's been a while, but yeah. So how you been coping in lockdown? What's been happening with you?
It's interesting, isn't it? And I feel quite guilty because I run my own consultancy company, and I actually had a record year the last 12 months. And it's turnover's gone up, and obviously travelling expenses have gone down. I should have travelled to Europe 4 or 5 times, into the States 3 or 4 times this year, and of course none of it's happened. So it's been I feel really guilty saying this because I know that a lot of people have had an absolutely dreadful year, and don't get me wrong, we have moments. We've got the kids back from university, which is a stress for them because obviously it's their the time of their lives, and I think back to what it was like when I was sort of 19 and 21 at university, flying bulldogs on the UAS, drinking beer and playing rugby and playing cricket, and having the best years of my life before I got married. I have to say that, contractually obliged.
Of course.
It's I feel very sorry for them, and obviously they feel pent up. They're teenagers, they're full of testosterone and estrogen and everything else, and they're being told you can't meet your mates, you can't go out for a drink, you can't go to a nightclub, you can't have any fun really. So I'm really, really aware that for middle-aged fogies like me, I've just got my head down and worked really, and as a result, it's been a very, very good year. But I have to say I'm starting to get the stage now where I just want to get on a jet plane and go somewhere to a change of scenery, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think we're all in that position. But hopefully, I think, was it, well, if the government, goes by it, the 12th of April, we'll have to sit out in some sort of beer garden. Whether that'll happen or not, we'll see, I guess.
And then hotels in May. And then when hotels start in May, then I can probably start opening my business up again, start going to see clients, start going to, go to places where we can actually do something rather than, this works fantastically. Don't get me wrong. We've become very, very technology savvy over the last 12 months. I've bought myself a nice gaming chair to sit on, and
very posh.
The Bura bunker has been revamped with a proper desk and everything else now in here. So it is a proper office, as well as my sort of retreat. So I don't think we'll ever go back to anything that was quite this, for a lot of jobs anyway. We won't go back to quite the same way that we were a year ago. Some people will, and I know that I'm very lucky. My kids are all a bit older. The youngest is still in secondary school, but I know that for those of people that are perhaps watching, listening, who've had kids in primary school, it's been a heck of a year. And one of the things I do on the side, I volunteer as a director of a multi-academy trust of 12 schools. Wow. So I see firsthand the education system, and I've seen the strains and the pressures, because all the teachers haven't been off. Everybody thinks the teachers have had a year off. Well, of course they haven't. The schools have all mostly been open for key worker children. So they've not had a year off. In fact, they've had it very difficult. But I do see that we're past the witching hour, and we do have some questions. So
yeah, absolutely. But before we get into it, just who are people who are joining us at 1 minute past 7 UK time? Foo, can you briefly talk us through your flying career from like where you began and where you are now? That'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So Foo Kennard. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I learned to fly at 17. I was an air cadet. So I did what we would, I suppose you'd call it, a classic entry into the Air Force. So I joined the Air Training Corps at 13 and 9 months, as soon as I could. Got the flying bug properly as an air cadet. sitting in the back of a chipmunk, that sort of stuff. Applied for, was very lucky, I got a flying scholarship, so I learned to fly at 17, and then went to University Air Squadron, brilliant. And then I joined the Air Force straight from university at 21. So I did a bit of elementary flying training on the Firefly, went to Tucanos. I did the full basic flying training course on Tucanos, did the full fast jet lead-in course on Tucanos, got a single seat recommend for Valley and got sent helicopters, as did a lot of my generation, as a result of the knock-on effects from the Cold War and the closing down of the OCUs, then the massive reduction in force sizes from RAF Germany. Very, very bitter at the time. Very, very pleased about 4 years later when you realise what a really good secret helicopters are in terms of fun. So 2 tours frontline. Winding back, last RAF course at Shawbury, so Gazelle and Wessex. So I have flown some vintage aeroplanes as well. And then 2 tours frontline on the Chinook on 27 and 18 Squadron. So Bosnia, Kosovo, Northern Ireland, a couple of stints in the Falklands, environmental training in Norway, and finished it off with Telic 1 rather, into Iraq in 2003. And then I did 3 years on the operational evaluation unit, teaching tactics, developing new stuff for the aircraft, developing new tactics, techniques, and procedures, standard operating procedures for the aircraft, trialing new kit, basically. Then I went into a desk job where I bought kit for the aircraft for 3 years as the requirements manager, and then back to the OEU as a flight commander, where, again, teaching the tactics course, bringing new stuff onto the aircraft, including the introduction of the Mark IV, Mark V, and the Mark VI, and also I did a bit of search and rescue there as well, where I flew the Bell 412 and the Sea King as an aside, but I didn't formally qualify on them. I just flew them for fun, which was always the best way to go flying. My last job in the Air Force was in technology management, so I ran future technology programs. So you may have heard of some of them, such as the Bright Cloud, Expendable Active Decoy, the Thales, Elixir, Missile Warner, and a number of other bits and pieces were technology programs back in the day when I was helping to run them. So a potted history. The last 5 years I've run my own company. I specialise in defence consultancy, do a bit of journalism, and of course the most thrilling thing is interacting with the team at Aircrew Interview and having an opportunity to chat to you guys, because at the end of the day, all I am is a spotter that got lucky.
Well, as you see, there's a few questions coming in, Foo, so I'm going to let you loose.
Right then. So I am going to go to the top of the list and ask some questions. So Harry, thank you very much. Good evening to you. Harry asks, how many hours do you average in the Chinook? That's a really difficult one. I did over 15 years on and off of flying it, of which about 11 were actively flying it. I did 2,000 hours on the aircraft and about 400 hours on the simulator. So you're looking at an average around about 200 hours a year. But that was really heavily biased into the first 6 years. The first 6 years, I probably did about 1,500 hours on 27 and 18 Squadron on the front line. The OEU, we didn't fly as much, about 100 hours a year on the OEU, because you were busy doing other things apart from flying. And I did know Munders very well. In fact, I flew with him on 27 Squadron, and he was my OEU navigator for a couple of years as well. And then I took over from him as the Chinook RM. So I know John very, very well. Evening, Stuart. Stuart, did I always want to fly helicopters and specifically Chinook? No, I think I answered that in the intro without realising it. No, I wanted to fly jets. I wanted to fly the Phantom, and I wanted to fly the Buccaneer. Those are the 2 jets I wanted to fly. When I joined the Air Force in 92 from university, the Phantom was retired early as a result of the peace dividend after the end of the Cold War. The Buccaneer at the time was slated to stay in service till about 2000. So I focused on thinking, right, I want to fly the Buccaneer. And then as I was going through flying training, they made the decision that the Buccaneer was going to be scrapped early as well. And so both the jets I wanted to fly had disappeared in the space of about 2 years. So I wasn't really sure. I didn't have a massive urge to fly the Harrier. The Jaguar, frankly, scared me with its reputation, and I wasn't that good either. I really didn't see myself as a single seat pilot ever. I always prefer to be flying with somebody in the aeroplane, even if it was an instructor some of the times. So I looked at it and I thought, well, is this going to be a toss of the coin at the end of Valley will where my scores sit, whether I end up on GRs or F3s. So I didn't really have a preference. When I went to Chinooks, when I went helicopters rather, because none of us were expecting to go helicopters, none of us had really understood anything about helicopters at all. You imagine we were told it's fast jet or bust. That was the mentality we had going through flying training. So I thought originally I'll go Puma, because we had a couple of Puma instructors on BFTS, and they said, oh no, you got to go Puma. The Chinook's death trap, the Boeing body bag, the contra-rotating death banana. You don't want to fly the aeroplane. It's dangerous, and you're away all the time anyway. You got to fly the Puma because there's a Tiger Squadron 230. You fly it with your sleeves rolled up, single pilot, and that's the way to go. So I thought, oh, I'll fly the Puma then. That sounds quite punchy. And then I started going through helicopter training, and we had I remember it vividly. We had a graduation of one of our senior courses, and we had a Puma there and a Chinook there and a Sea King there, which everybody ignored because nobody wanted to be seen when you're a Sea King in case they sent you search and rescue. Which is like, something you do when you're my age now. You didn't do it at 25. And that's very insulting to any SAR pilots here, but that's just the way it is. And the Puma departed, and it sort of whizzled past at 140 odd knots at sort of 60, 70 feet. We thought, oh, that's quite nice. And a nice big wing over. And you thought, oh, that's quite cool. And then the Chinook departed, and I'd sat in both aeroplanes. And the Chinook, you sat in it, and you just felt like it was hewn out of a block of stone. So if the Wessex was very similar. If you sat in any sort of 1950s, 1960s aircraft, the Buccaneer felt like it was a block of stone that had been carved into the shape of an aeroplane. It just felt solid. I sat in the Buccaneer a few times. I flew the Sim a couple of times, which is why I wanted to fly it. And the Chinook just felt monstrous compared to the Puma. And as it departed past us, this Chinook came past 50 foot, 140 knots, pulled up about 40 nose up, and just did this enormous clattering wing over departure. That was about twice to 3 times as high as the Puma got off the same zoom, and just left this massive noise. And that was just like, right, that's it. Chinook, don't give a no. Pumas don't care. Roll your sleeves up. Tiger, rah rah rah, don't care. Chinook. So when I got there, it was the Chinook and nothing else. Advice for OASC, Harry. It's a long time obviously since I did OASC. I'll tell you how long ago it was. I did OASC at Biggin Hill. Yeah, at Biggin Hill. For my flying scholarship and my university bursary, which is how I joined in the end. I've been back to OASC and helped out on a couple of courses. My advice for OASC is take care of the stuff you can take care of. So the stuff you can take care of is fitness, it's deportment. So you can pass the fitness test. The medical, there's not right. Just chill out about the medical. There's nothing you can do about that. I was at Biggin Hill, and there were people next to me that failed the medical, looked as fit as a butcher's dog because they found something wrong with them that they didn't even know they had. Marginal colour blindness, a whiff of asthma or something. So chill about the medical. You can't control the medical, apart from not turn up. Well, I did turn up on the medical after on the University Air Squadron, having been to see the Who in concert the night before, and I couldn't hear anything, and I failed the hearing medical. I had to come back 2 weeks later. But don't do that. But you can't do anything else realistically about the medical. Turn up, look smart, be on time, be early, be prepared, read the papers, have a general interest in what you are. Most of all, understand that the CBAT, you don't try and game the tests. The tests are designed not to be gamed, as far as I'm aware, and be honest. The biggest single thing that when I used to interview people to join University Air Squadron that annoyed me was when I just thought that somebody was telling me what I wanted to hear because they'd read on lots of forums. These are the questions they want, and these are the answers they want. Because actually, it's a lot less scripted than that. It's a lot less fluid. I just wanted people to be honest with me. And if they didn't know the answer to a question, tell me I didn't know. So be yourself, be honest, and take care of the stuff you can take care of before you go. Low level, hey, always the best. A few questions. Not sure if you've come. How was flying the Chinook going to a helicopter with no tail rotor? Yes, so it has got force trim and it's got a coolie hat trim as well. Easy, in a word. The thing about the Chinook compared to something like the Wessex or the Gazelle and other sort of half helicopters I've flown since then, the tail rotor is a very inelegant answer to a difficult question, which is how do you counteract torque reaction of a main rotor? The problem with the tail rotor is it's stuck down the back. It makes your aircraft unusually long. And obviously, every time you put power, because it's got a power pedal. If you use power pedal, it takes power away from the rotor system, which means you lose hover performance. So the Chinook was dead easy to fly. Immense amount of power at light weights. You're hovering at 41% torque. Most helicopters will hover in about 80% torque. This thing's hovering at 40 lightweight. In a wind, it could be below 40, 38, 37%. I've seen hovering a Chinook light. So you've got an enormous amount of power. And most importantly, you just lift the hover. There's no torque reaction. It's not the wind doesn't get hold of you and try and, it has to be a really strong wind to try and weathercock a Chinook. So it's a really, really, it's a very straightforward aeroplane to fly. It flies like a fixed wing above 40 knots. So I took my crewman one of my SAR crewmen into the Chinook simulator one day. He was a motor glider pilot for the air cadets. And within 30 minutes, he was flying circuits perfectly in a Chinook because it's that easy. Because it's so stable below 40 knots, and above 40 knots, you fly it like a fixed wing. Oh, thanks, Jamie. You're very kind. Steve J. I was on Odium in the 90s on 240 OCU in 20. Did I ever fly with Dr. Death? No, Bob was just seeing out his time when I arrived. I arrived on 27 Squadron to do the OCU in 97. And Bob was hanging around, but I never actually had the joy of flying with Bob. But the tales of Bob are absolute legend, but sadly not for this forum. Is the Chinook the fastest helicopter in British service? I heard they were surprisingly fast for a helicopter. Yeah, they are really, really fast. We redline ours at 160. The Americans redline theirs at 172 or something. The thing about the Chinook is that the speed is you're not actually very rarely power limited in forward flight. So most helicopters hit a limit where they run out of power to accelerate. The Chinook never had that problem. I never ran out of power trying to accelerate. So it means you've got power in hand. So I had a race with a Puma once because John Murnane was in the left-hand seat and his wife or fiance at the time was in the left-hand seat of the Puma. So we had a race out of Benson one day. And we're doing 150 knots. He's just about keeping up. And then there's a set of 250-foot pylons. Well, game over. We're going to win this because I had enough power just to maintain 150 knots and pull pitch straight up, keep going. Puma had to flared off about 40 knots to get over the top of the pylons to come back down. Game over. We had to slow down often for our escort in Afghanistan and Iraq. So the Lynx couldn't keep up with us. Because the Lynx is running out of power where it's hot and high. It's a quick helicopter, the Lynx, but it runs out of power. The Apache was struggling as well. What the Chinook can also do really, really well is stop. That's the bit that people forget. It actually stops quicker than any other helicopter in the British military, and probably the world, because you can just use, you've seen the nose down quick stop in the display. You can hold the airplane sideways, pull power against it, use the whole aircraft as an air brake. So there's lots of things you can do. It stops really quickly. The Puma, the Merlin are really slippery aeroplanes that don't slow down very well because they're designed to be aerodynamic. There is no such thing. Aerodynamic is a complete anathema to a Chinook. It's a brick with some fuel pods, some engines, some rotors, and some wheels on it. That's all a Chinook is. It's a brick. And it flies like one in terms of aerodynamics if you want to exploit it. Right, where we got to. Thanks, John. Says I would like how much choice you have as what direction you're. Right. So the first thing is, Harry. The first thing is that the most important thing with the Air Force is timing and service needs. So my own personal example, the service didn't need me. They told us that first day of flying training on Tucanos, we don't need you, which is why you've got to get a single seat recommend to pass the course. Otherwise, we're all chopping you. Now, that seemed really harsh at the time. You fast forward to 2010, and you got the guys who were halfway through courses being told, sorry, the watermark's come to you, you're being made redundant. No fault your own. We just need to get rid of people, 25% of everybody in the flying training system. So you have to understand that the Air Force will drive you, it will take your wishes into account. So the only time I ever got what I wanted was the Chinook. I only got that because I came top of my course at Shawbury. And there was an unwritten rule, which was top of the course, you got your first choice of posting. So I got the Chinook. Everything else is about timing. When I took a Wessex back to Linton about 18 months after I graduated, when I graduated from Linton, about 10% of the graduates were going fast jet. Everybody else was going helicopters. 18 months later, 100% of people were going to fast jet. and most of them, and a lot of them, were getting scores that would have seen them chopped on my course. That's just the way that the system works. So you can want to fly helicopters, they'll send you fast jet. You can want to fly multis, they'll send you helicopters. It just depends what the service need is at the time when you turn up. Once you're established, then of course you can express an interest in instructing, whether it's proper instructing, tactical instruction, or whether it's noncing around telling people they're not quite in trim and is that really 500 feet downwind, that sort of trimming, beefing nonsense that CFS put out. So, but I kind of like QFIs and QHOs. Really, they're all right when they're not nagging you. But so once you're in and you're in a force, you then get into this process where you talk to your flight commander, you talk to your chain of command, you might talk to your desk officer after you've got maybe a couple of reports under your belt. He'll say, what do you want to do? I say, I'd like to instruct after my next tour. And then and if you've done well enough and you've played the game with them, then they'll hopefully let you carry on. So it all depends. Jamie, how do you find the transition from frontline after acquiring all that flying knowledge and experience of staff running big projects? Absolutely essential. It's why they pick you to go and do those, because the reason you take that job, especially as the capability requirements manager, is that you sit there in a room with a full of engineers who sit there and say, this is what we're going to do the aeroplane. It'd be really easy for the engineers to fix. And you say, no, stop, because that will be useless in the field. Because when I fly in the aeroplane in this circumstance, if you put that there, it's going to be a disaster. And this is what the aircrew want. They need this. So you become the designated shopper. So you swan around the catalogue going, I'll have some of those, I'll have some of these, I'll have some of these. If I knew it was that easy. You become a Babel fish, where you translate aircrew into engineer and engineer into aircrew. And you are there to hold the line, just to make sure the engineers don't go away and create the world's most elegant engineering solution, which is of absolutely no use to man the beast in the field. So it's absolutely I really quite enjoyed it, and that's one of the reasons I do what I do now. I enjoy the capability development, the capability management side of what I do. I was very fortunate in my career that very few people get to see something from concept to fielding. And when I was a requirements manager, I started off a load of programs for urgent operational updates for the Chinook, in terms of EOIR, FLIR turrets, in terms of new radios, in terms of new defensive aid suites, new engines, new everything. So I started it conceptually. I went back to the OEU. I ended up testing it. So I was marking my own homework. Of course, it was brilliant, Natch. And then I deployed to Afghanistan for a month with 27 Squadron in 2011, basically to see all the kit being used on the front line and how it was working and flying. So, from the idea that I had over a coffee with another squadron leader on one of the coffee machines in MOD main building, we said, we need to solve this problem. How are we going to solve it? 4 years later, I'm sat there in Helmand, strapped to a Chinook, flying it around with all this kit that I bought with it. So that's really, really, and that for me personally was very, very satisfying. So I enjoyed it, and I still do a lot of that now. All right, where are we? Right. Any thoughts on the US future? Yes, lots of thoughts on that. We've got a bit of time. So you've got a program called Joint Vertical Lift, JVL, which breaks into a number of subsets. So you've got JVL cap sets, capability sets. The ones they're looking at the moment are effectively joint military rotorcraft, where it is JMR Light, which is the FARA, so the future something reconnaissance aircraft, and then attack and reconnaissance aircraft, and the FLRAA, the future long-range assault aircraft. So the FARA is there effectively to replace the Kiowa, which wasn't replaced when it was retired. The FLRAA is the Black Hawk replacement. FARA is relatively low risk in terms of it's not as high a performance specification as the FLRAA. The FLRAA is where the big money is in, because that's a Black Hawk replacement. That's potentially 5,000 airframes over the course of the life if you're going to replace the Black Hawk broadly 1-to-1 across everyone who's bought it. So the FLRAA, interesting V280, the Bell tilt rotor against the Defiant, the Sikorsky Boeing thing. I've written on this quite a lot for Heliops magazine. If you want to find has written loads of articles on this. Just look at the Heliops magazine, you'll find them. But in essence, my bet on it is that the Valor, the V280, will win FLRAA, because It's more mature than the Defiant. The Defiant uses technology that seems to work very well at small scale at Sikorsky, doesn't seem to scale up that well, and it's a very big, complex aeroplane. The V280 leverages of all the stuff that Bell have learned over the last 25, 30 years designing and building V22. So it's got a lot more provenance behind it. And I see the other way round in the Flower, because I think the Bell Invictus is a bit too safe. Comanche with wing stuff, and the Raider, which is the same X2 technology, so the coax and the thruster. I think it works at that sort of size, and I think that will be a very nimble, very, very useful little scout aircraft if they can get it to work properly. I also not a big fan, if I'm honest, with Sikorsky Boeing on the Defiant, because the thought of having that massive churning meat grinder at the back of a helicopter, I mean, in a dark, unlit LZ, I can just see troops running into that all the time. I don't think it's a massively sensible thing to have in a battlefield helicopter. So my pick is Valor for Flower and Raider X for Farah. But I'm going to put any money on it. Right. Right. Your top 3 must-read history books. Right. You're very lucky because I have a you may have noticed I have 1 or 2 tomes here in the Fura bunker. So top 3 history books. You must read this. Fighter Pilot, Robin Olds. Have to read it. It's one of the most enjoyable books I have ever read. Absolutely fascinating. You're dream dinner party guest, Robin Olds. If you could live a life half as good as Robin Olds, you're probably going to burn out at 25. How that guy lasted to his age, I'd never know. There's got to be, let's have a look in here. Where is it? Hiding somewhere. It's going to be hiding somewhere. Oh, there you go, yeah. Got to read Chicken Hawk. If you've not read Chicken Hawk, you've not lived. As a helicopter guy. Fascinating and terrifying and really quite scary at the same time. A third one, that's really difficult. It's a history book. That's a pure history book, I suppose. Oh, that's a real difficult one. There are so many ones I want to recommend to you. And it's not going to be Frenchy Duncan's book about Afghanistan, or it's definitely not going to be Bully's Hammond's book either. I think I'm going to cheat. I'm going to give you the one history book that's kind of military but isn't, that I've read probably 4 times cover to cover. And it's a book by Richard Rhodes called The Making the Atomic Bomb. Now that's a bit of a weird one. I'm not a physicist. My degree's in history. It's not in particle physics or quantum physics or nuclear physics. I understood that book. By the time I read that book, I understood how to build an atomic bomb in layman's terms. It's a very, very approachable. If you read one book on Manhattan Program, read that one. Brilliant. But we could do that all day. Oh dear. I would also say you got to read that. I'm cheating. I'm taking a 4th, which is the book on Boyd. So if you want to know about the genesis of the F-16, the issues of the F-15, the issues of the Pentagon in the 1960s and 1970s, read that book about Boyd. Boyd, I wouldn't have as a dinner party guest because he was known as Genghis Boyd for many, many reasons. I wouldn't have him round to my house at all. I don't think. I think we'd probably end up having a punch up on the veranda or something. But if you want to know about what good people do, fighting for their service and not wishing to be rewarded for it in terms of medals or career, John Boyd's book. Read it. Brilliant. Right, Harry. It's not spam. That's what we're here for. Could I ask, anything about the current recruitment environment for pilots? It's really not going to be very good, I'm afraid, mate. The current circumstances with COVID has meant that obviously militaries get used to a steady outflow of people. So people reach, either a voluntary or a mandatory retirement age and they leave. The military sets its training system up to absorb that loss and maybe a few more just in case anybody has an accident or leaves early or whatever. The problem the military have got is the last year, I don't think many people have left. And I had the same thing with the financial crash in 2008. I had an option to leave in 2009, which I was going to take, and I didn't. I stayed in for another 6 years because of the financial crash. So you'll have people that were determined to leave over the last 18 months have just gone, no, I'm going to stay and hide in the Air Force, wait for the world to sort itself back out. Ally that with hundreds of airline pilots being made redundant in an and the way that it's been done this time has been really interesting, because normally airlines get rid of people on a last in first out basis, so it's all on seniority. So there's a seniority watermark in an airline where if you have a certain seniority, you're probably pretty safe unless the airline goes bust. It's not happened this time. The airlines have used it as an opportunity to get rid of whole fleets. So if you were flying an Airbus or a Dreamliner, you were probably okay-ish. If you're flying a 747, you were probably out of a job. And so a lot of people that left the Air Force 5, 6, 7 years ago have been rejoining. Now, they may rejoin for 3 years, they may rejoin for 6. They may rejoin as a full-time reservist, which a lot of them are doing, going into university air squadrons or AEFs. But a friend of mine's just taken over a UAS. He retired from the Air Force as a wing commander about 3 years ago. He's now back in as a squadron leader running a UAS. The Air Force benefits by having that experience back in. It's cost them nothing to train, just a quick refresh and a tick, off you go. And that sort of 20 years of accrued experience is now at the Air Force's disposal again for 3, 6, 9, 12 years, depending. But the where it suffers is people like yourself trying to get in the front door, because the training system will be slowed to an absolute crawl, because the training system was backlogged anyway because of issues with Ascent and MFTS, and now there's not a need for the front line. And if we go through the integrated review in a couple of weeks, and if it's half as true, sadly, it's half as true as what's been promulgated, i.e. get rid of Puma, get rid of C-130J, get rid of Islander, Sentinel not being replaced, Tranche 1 Typhoons going, 9 Squadron as a result of that going, possibly 100 Squadron going, you keep going, 146 going, then you're back to where I was in 1992, where the front line shrank by about 30% overnight. Except this time it's worse, because nobody's leaving and people are coming back in. So I think, sadly, and I'm just being honest here, Harry, I think you're looking down the barrel of a perfect storm for the next 3 years of it being there will be enough recruitment to just keep the system, the pipeline ticking over, and it won't be much more than that. That, of course, means that the Air Force can then pick and choose who they want, and they will only take the people, the very, very best skills, the very best aptitude marks, the very best fitness, the very best officer potential. You think about what your perfect recruit would look like, and that's probably what the Air Force is. The only few people that are going to make it in, and if you make it in, the chances are your flying training is going to be protracted, and there's no guarantee you're going to end up flying what you want to fly. I know that sounds really depressing, but the Navy have canned recruitment as well. It's just going to be a perfect storm the next 3 years, I'm afraid. I don't know how old you are, Harry, and how long you can wait. My advice, if possible, if you haven't already, I don't know how old you are. If you're 17, 18, go to uni, join a university air squadron, find out a bit more about the Air Force. If you finished university or you're not going to university, then think about a couple of things. Get a job that you can talk about, so you've done something, and then consider doing some voluntary work. So either volunteering with your local air cadet squadron, scouts, or something like that. That's the sort of stuff that in an interview is catnip. If I sat there and said somebody's been an air cadet for 8 years, risen to the rank of flight sergeant, done this, done that, done this, done that, done this, done that. Wow, I'm good on you. You've got off your ass and done something. Pardon my French. So I would use the time wisely, but I'd also, depending on your age, I'd really consider thinking about a plan B as well, making it quite a robust one, and if only for a plan B for another 2 or 3 years, and then see what's happened and whether you've made the age restrictions or not. Sorry about that. It's just one of those things. I'm just trying to be honest. Min says, how are you? Dropping in before getting back to work. Oh, yeah. You got to work. Could you do a rotation in a Chinook? Yes, you can. It does it very, very well. It's got a massive rotor area, massive rotor system. It auto-rotates like a honey. In fact, I used to finish most of a lot of my sim sorties with a auto-rotation to the flight deck of the aircraft carrier. And what I used to do is aim into the undershoot and use there's so much flare effect. I'd aim for about 50 meters off the back of the boat, and then use the flare effect to actually flare the aeroplane onto the flight deck. So the aircraft auto rotates really nicely. It's not got some aircraft you fly. I flew an EC-135 for a few hours one day, and we did some auto rotations in it. And that thing has got a really, really sensitive rotor system to NR handling on the way down. So NR's rotor speed. So you literally very fine margins. It would spin up. You'd have to pull a bit of power in, and it would start to slow down. And you literally were doing this really small movements, having quite big effects. The Chinook gave you plenty of notice when the rotor system was speeding up or slowing down. There was plenty you could do about it. So it auto rotated like a honey. The other thing that was really good about the Chinook, and not just for auto rotations but for dust landings as well, is that those big wheels at the back meant that the rear rotor was miles away, so you could flare the aeroplane 25 nose up and land it if you had to for whatever reason. So you could flare that aeroplane onto the ground, and of course, we were cleared to do running landings in the Chinook up to 60 knots. I think it was 60 knots. Yeah, 60 knot running landings. So if you think about it, you haven't actually got to flare that much off to convert your coming down to going along, and just flare it onto the runway at 60 knots if you wanted to. So it was, the only problem you had was that as the NR decayed below a certain speed, the generators would trip off, and you'd lose the flight control. You'd lose the stabilization system. So that's why you put the APU on at the start of the part of the drills for a double engine failure, is to get the APU on, so that you don't execute the perfect running landing at the bottom and then shopping trolley into the nearest tree. All right, why do you guys call the collector lever the? I'm a 60 guy. I can never figure it out. Well, I don't know. It's American. They call it the thrust lever. I don't know. We call it a collective in the UK. It's always a Wessex collective, Gazelle collective, Sea King collective, Chinook thrust lever. I really have no idea why it was called a thrust lever, but it was called a thrust lever. And as typical American aeroplane, everything is stenciled on it. So another top tip for aspiring aviators out there: for your Stanival ground cat happiness, fly an American aeroplane, because everything is labeled. Brilliant. What's that? Oh, it's the it's that. And what pressure should that be at? It should be at 25 psi. Oh, that's very good. Well done. Yeah, because it's all written on the aeroplane. What's life like as an RAF pilot? Well, that's pretty cool, actually, isn't it? It's so the biggest thing is, it's not like you see in the movies or TV at all. Certainly not in the helicopter world. Not that we get many movies made about us. So what's it like? So personal point of view here. I wanted to fly aeroplanes since the age of about 6. So for me, having those wings put on my chest that first time at my wing ceremony was just almost an out-of-body experience, because it meant so much to me. It's unlike almost any other thing you do on this planet. You cannot buy it. So to earn a set of military wings, it is earned. You don't just go and say, hey, I sold 1 million records, I'm going to go and buy myself a set of military wings. You don't do it. It doesn't happen. You have to fulfill the standards to do it. So you join a pretty elite club when you become a military pilot. What that then gives you is a camaraderie, which is probably second to none. In the helicopter force, you spend a significant amount of time in very austere conditions, sleeping in the back of the airplane, sleeping in tents, sleeping in barrack blocks if you're lucky, hotel luxury, with not only your the rest of the pilots, the navigators, but with the crewmen, but also with the engineers. So the helicopter force has a very, very strong ethos of very togetherness. It's a camaraderie, which when you're laying on the floor having been scudded, you're still laughing at each other and taking the piss out of each other. It's brilliant. That's the bit about being a pilot. It's brilliant. The flying is fantastic. It's flying you cannot get elsewhere. The legal stuff that you can do, that you see people flash past in an airplane, an air show at 50 feet, and you think, oh, well, great. Well, I used to fly everywhere at 50 feet. Pretty much outside chain link, and obviously not downtown for the centre of London. That was about 800 feet. But you get to do things that you would otherwise not dream of doing, and then you also make a difference. So you save lives. I've saved lives in helicopters in a couple of different theatres. You see things you wouldn't see. So what's life like It's great fun. It used to be great. I have to say, I left 5 years ago. The social life was wonderful. Being at a dining in night back in the day. This is probably in the mid to late 90s, where we would quite often have Battle of Britain veterans at a Battle of Britain dining in night. You'd have people that fought in the battle. You'd start it off with the Battle of Britain flight would invariably send you a Spitfire or a Hurricane, or sometimes both if you were lucky. So you'd be outside. The flags would drop, Spitfire would come past, do a display. You go inside, and you'd spend 4 hours drinking, smoking cigars, and telling stories and hearing somebody who was there talk about what it was like to be there. So unlike the Navy and the Army, who both carp on about stuff that happened in 1805 and 1815 respectively, we actually in the Air Force interacted with people that had fought our most famous battle, the Battle of Britain. And it was fantastic, a privilege to be of an age where you could have people who'd flown Mosquitoes, people who'd flown Lancasters, people who'd flown Spitfires, Hurricanes, Typhoons, come and talk to you about what it was like, and then drink beer and smoke with you afterwards. So that side of the Air Force was fabulous. I loved my time in the Air Force. We came to a natural parting of the ways for various reasons. I think it probably shines through that I'm still a massive fan of the Air Force. I still love the service dearly. So it was a massive. How could I know? It was nearly half of my life was spent in the Air Force. So I enjoyed it immensely. It was my life's ambition to do it. I did it for 22 years over a number of operational theatres, and it was just, and I sit there, barely a day goes past where I don't get some banter from somebody I flew with, somebody went through training with, somebody I knew in a staff job. Every day, I guarantee it, I'll get banter from somebody or other, and it will fly. And when this lockdown is restricted, I think there's going to be carnage somewhere when we start getting together. We've got a whole year's worth of drinking to catch up on. Dave, what's your favourite colour? Well, it isn't yellow. And what's set me dues to have an offset? A whole load. So I mean, it depends what you want to do. If you want to have a massive career and you want to get to the top of the Air Force, then there are jobs you need to. There are secondary duties that you should do, like wines member, flowers member, junior bar member, get on the Ents committee for the summer ball, that sort of stuff. Run a barrack block. I mean, I've done all of those. It didn't get me very far. So there are lots of secondary duties out there. It just depends what your appetite is. You will be expected to do them because it gives your chain of command something to write you up for, as showing excess capacity over your flying duties. So I think it's important to understand that just being the best pilot on the base doesn't get you promoted. And in fact, quite often it deliberately doesn't get you promoted because you are the best pilot on the base and they need you for flying duties. So I've seen people whose careers have been capped a relatively low rank because the Air Force deemed that their particular handling skills and other flying related skills were too valuable to be lost into staff jobs and stuff like that. So yes, it's a lot up to you. I want to be a Chinook pilot? Yep. I want to ask a question. Do you really miss your girly Chinook? I've never heard a Chinook called girly before. I've heard it called many, many things. A functional beauty is probably the best thing. It's girly. I wouldn't suggest it was girly, but that's each their own. And who's to know whether the Chinook identifies as female, male, or something in between? Cynthia, I'm glad you agreed. I'm not quite sure with, but I'm glad you do. Robin Olds had the mandatory go fast moustache, the bulletproof moustache, which was totally illegal and which he was ordered to shave off many, many times. Read the book. There's and the US Air Force now, in fairness, do have moustache, which is May, was it? They have a month of the year where they all try and grow bulletproof moustaches for that reason, which is superb. Stuart, will you ever write a book? I'm 75,000 words into a book at the moment. So yeah, if I ever get around to finishing it, the trouble is every time I sit down to write a book, one of my editors asks me to write an article. So I bang out 3,000 words of them on something, and I think, I'm going to go back to the book, and I'm 300 words into it, and I'm knackered. So I'm 72,000 words into the book. So yes, hopefully at some stage, I'd hoped to have it out last year, for the 40th anniversary of the Chinook, but we didn't quite make that. So yeah, sadly, but yeah, it's coming, hopefully. Have you ever done a water landing? And does the RAF use its special ops? Yes, it does. Have I ever done a water landing? Only in the simulator, because they found out that doing water landings is where the aeroplane is perfectly capable of doing them. It does cause quite a lot of water to go under the cargo floor, which can cause corrosion. So the aeroplane was perfectly capable. We had a water dam in the back of the aircraft. So you put this thing up, you'd land the aeroplane, you'd lower the ramp, you'd flood up to the water dam. So you've got like about 18 inches of water in the back of the aeroplane, bring your boat in, then you'd lift up and about 4 tons of water would pull out. Trouble is, if you didn't then go through particularly if you were doing this in salt water, if you didn't go down through a complete decontamination set, the thing would start rusting. And we found out the only thing that rusted the floor quicker than salt was blood, which is one of the reasons why we had specific blood floors in the aircraft when we're doing MERT, because blood corrodes even worse than salt water does. The RF does use it for special forces operations. That's fairly common knowledge now. 7th Squadron used to be a special forces flight. It's now a special forces squadron. So yeah, go away and see what open source stuff you can find out about 7th Squadron. What's the heaviest payload you carried or lifted in the Chinook? I think 67. Is that wing 67? Is that right? I don't know. So heaviest payload was completely unintentional. In the Falklands, top of a hill, about 60 knots of wind, gradient wind in the Falklands at about 1,500 feet. So we've been asked to lift this. It's not an ISO container. It's like a prefabricated building. And they've said, yeah, we weighed it all. It weighs about 8 tons, maybe 9. Okay, fine. We got plenty of power in hand. Look at the performance figures. It will come off at about 85, 86%, something like that. So we'd made up set performance figures. It'll be fine. So I'm driving. I've been off the OCU about 4 months. My first operational attachment down the Falklands. I've got my OCU flight commander, the guy who taught me to fly the Chinook, is sat there in the left-hand seat, and he's done the power figures. I've lifted it up. It reads on the torque gauge, kind of what we thought. What he hadn't done was factor in 60 knots of wind coming through the disc. And up the side of the hill and up through the disc. So not only have we got wind coming directly in, we've also got updrafting air coming up the side of the hill as we pick this thing up, which meant that as I'm going down the hill, I go into wind shadow, and I'm now flying this thing about 50 knots because it's a single point thing. I can't fly any faster than that, 40, 50 knots. And as I'm starting to bring the air, I'm seeing where I'm going to put it in this sort of little bowl at the bottom with high ground beyond it. And I thought, well, the lever position feels quite high. And look inside, I'm pulling 98% torque, and we're still going down at about 1,000 feet per minute, and I'm at about 50 knots. And it's like, I've only got like, I look across at a guy on the left-hand seat. I was like, what are we going to do? And he went, what are you going to do? And I went, well, I've got 2 options, really. I can try and zero speed it at the bottom by holding, and at the last minute flaring, because this thing's only going to be scrapped anyway, or I can jettison it. And he said, no, don't jettison it. Try zero speeding it at the bottom. Thinking, like, this guy's got like 3,000 hours on the Chinook. He's going to take it off me. There's me with about 150 hours on the Chinook, and I'm having to do it. And we got to the bottom. It all worked like clockwork. I briefed the crewman. As soon as he saw one part of the thing in contact with the ground, to jettison it using the manual release down the centre hatch. And then obviously we overshot, came back round. And we found out about 4 days later, they cut 6.5 ton generator out of it, and it still weighed about 8.5 tons. So it was a nearly 15 tons we lifted when the centre hook's only supposed to take about 12 with the rigging. So that was the heaviest single thing I've lifted by mistake, was about a 15 ton port cabin down the Falklands. Cynthia, is there an age restriction? Yes, there is. There's age restrictions on joining, depending on what branch you want to do. A lot of obviously flying, because of the length of the flying training, they want you younger, and it's not only the length of the flying training so you get productive at the other end. It's because obviously the younger you are, the more the psychologists will tell you the more adaptive your brain is to new ideas and new skill sets. You can imprint them easier than as an old person. But the Air Force is looking for lots of people across the age groups, and lots of people. Interesting, when towards the end of my time, lots of people coming in their 40s who'd always wanted to join the Air Force, had full careers, and maybe are IT experts or something else, and just came in and did 6 years as a full-time reservist. So they literally came in, did a commissioning course, and then just said, "Well, I'm only here for 6 years, but I'm going to do IT or something," and just to scratch the itch of serving in the military. So on a non-pensionable term, just as a full-time reservist, as a career break almost, or as something to put on their CV. So there are age restrictions that tend to be stricter for aircrew, for pilot, but for a lot of the other supporting trades, many of which are equally important and sometimes I think increasingly more important, those age restrictions are far more relaxed. Have you had any UFO events? I think I saw one when I was about 7, I think. But apart from that, no, I don't think I've ever had a UFO event. Aeronaut, how big is an issue is vortex ring states, a VRS, settling with power, vortex ring state in the Chinook? Is it able to power out a VRS? The thing about helicopters is that when you learn to fly planks, so fixed wing aeroplanes, it's broadly understood how they work. You've got a bit of Bernoulli's, you've got a bit of thrust, lift, weight, drag, and you've got your angle of attack and your half row squared S, whatever it is, C, whatever coefficient of lift, half row squared S, whatever. Helicopters, it's kind of like, well, we think it does this, and we kind of think this is why it does that. It's a lot less certainty. In VRS, stroke settling with power, some people think it's the same thing. Some people think they're two completely different things. For people that aren't aware, what VRS is where you are coming down under power vertically at such a rate of descent that your own downdraft comes back and recirculates. So you are ingesting dirty air back into your rotor system as you descend. So you are constantly pulling dirty air into your rotor system, which means that you are effectively, it's kind of akin to a really deep stall in an aeroplane. Notionally, the Chinook should be able to power itself out of it, because there is a figure that I've seen in one book about a percentage of power over hover torque required to overcome VRS. The technique we were taught in the Chinook was sideways, so a bit like a Vulchard. We were taught to come out with sideways left, if ideally possible, because that puts both advancing blades into clean air. So the recovery Chinook, if you thought you were in a VRS with a Chinook, you came out sideways left. But I never saw it. I got one friend of mine thinks he got into VRS in Bosnia once, but yeah, we'll see. Did you know that girly Chinooks can get married and have baby Chinooks? And I've seen down there somebody's already got the answer to the question, which is the CH-46. Yeah, I annoyed a pilot, a very nice in all respects female pilot at a Chinook in America once, when she said, "Oh yeah, I used to fly the 46." So what's it like flying an aeroplane powered by 2 APUs rather than engines? Didn't go down too well. The other thing that the Chinook has actually created is at one stage a Chinook mated with a Wessex, and the offspring was the Black Hawk, because the Black Hawk, I've been flying the Black Hawk a bit as well, and it's a lovely aeroplane, the Black Hawk. I love it. It just feels like the product of a Chinook and a Wessex after a drunken night somewhere in Basra or somewhere. Glad you're enjoying it, Peter. Love to have a go on. Yeah, absolutely. Did the RAF eventually consolidate the various versions into a single mark? Right. Sadly, no. Believe me, we tried. It's difficult to do it. So at the moment, the RAF has got 5 6s and 6As. So the 5s are the fat tanked Mark IIIs that received a number of upgrades, the partial glass cockpit, stuff like that. The 6s, get me this right, the 6s were the new build F models. So we have actually bought Foxtrots. So one of the last things I did as a requirements manager was start the process of buying. We were going to buy 24 in 2009. One of the last spasms of the last Labour government was to make promises they couldn't, a number of raft of promises they couldn't afford, and one of them was 24 Chinooks. After SDR 10, that was reduced to 14, but those were brand new F models. They became the 6s, and they basically are identical to the USF model right the way up to the cockpit, so Station 120 as we call it, where the cockpit forward is British. So it's got a UK partial glass cockpit, which was not supposed to be there by that stage, but it still was. British radios, British avionics, British DAS, British FLIR turret, because the standard Foxtrot model doesn't have a FLIR, or didn't at the time anyway. And then we had only the higher modes of the DAFIX enabled, because DAFIX was designed to work with the Rockwell Collins cockpit that the bog standard F model had. So that gave us, at the time, We still had a few Mark IIs. We had a few Mark IIIs. We had the first Mark IVs, which were the Mark IIs that got the Julius cockpit and other upgrades. And then we were starting looking again the sixes. The 6 Alphas are the Mark IIs that became Mark IVs that then got Daffix to become Mark 6 Alphas. There is a chance that we'll end up in a more synthesized fleet again. That's what the Chinook Sustainment Program project, the CSP, is designed to do. But if we buy what looks like it's been ordered, looks like we're buying 47 Golfs. Certainly the spec that got released by the US Army looks a lot like a 47 Golf. Fat tanks in flight refueling and RF jammers tend to push you towards a Golf model. Then we'll probably end up having two quite distinct fleets again, where we'll have Golfs and then we'll have whatever the CSP delivers, which will probably be 2 Mark numbers anyway, because we'll probably modify the Mark Vs into a Mark 7, and I imagine that those aircraft that we decide to keep at 6 Alpha and 6 standard will probably become 8s and 8 Alphas. But I don't know. We're never going to get to a completely 1 Mark fleet, because we've already got fat tank, thin tank aeroplanes, and we're probably about to buy Golfs. Jamie, how easy is it technically to go to flying your one type to a different one other civil? Could you fly on a more difficult transition? So there's a helicopter is a helicopter is a helicopter. I've got into a Bell 412 and flown it. I've got into an MD 900 and flown it. I've got into an EC 135 and flown it. I've got into an MD 500 and flown it. A helicopter is a helicopter is a helicopter. You can fly it. It tends to maybe take 5-10 minutes to calibrate what you're doing with your hands, and then it's a helicopter. I treat every helicopter I fly like it's a Chinook with a stab out, and that way you have to think about using your feet, and that works a charm for me. But there's a difference between flying a helicopter and operating it efficiently as a tool. So yes, I've flown the Merlin simulator. It was all right. It's a bit asthmatic at times. Very smooth, very sort of like silky and everything else. Just not roughy tough. It never felt like a true battlefield helicopter to me. Niche helicopter, CSAR, long range trooper insertional, long range personnel recovery, that sort of stuff. Brilliant machine for that. Quiet, smooth, long range, very economical, slippery, good. So I could identify with the role going to the Merlin, but it would take me an OCU and some time to exploit that aeroplane's characteristics in the battlefield. So it's really easy to go to flying an aeroplane, another I found, and the Sea King as well, for the Sea King a bit as well as the Black Hawk. And flying them easy, operating them is the difficult bit, and that's what takes the practice. Were you on the Chinook display team? Sadly, no. I did get asked, but my day job was too busy. I wasn't asked. I was asked if I would be interested in doing it. I said yes, and unfortunately, my boss said no. He's far too busy. So it's probably best for everybody that I didn't do it.
So
how was Dunker training? I never had a problem with Dunker training. I had a view that you were only ever one bad run away from not enjoying the Dunker. And I saw lots of people who I thought were big roughy tufty people have an absolute hatred of the Dunker. I never had a problem with it. Did it every 2 years for 10. So I probably got dunked about 8 times over the course of my career. 6 runs each time, I think. But yeah, I never had a problem with it. Escape and survival, which just got cold and wet and people shouted at you. I'm just rushing through the last few now. What do I think the RF will do for a Puma replacement? Cynically, the answer is no, nothing, I think. Puma will go, I think, the IR, and we'll gap it. If we don't want to gap it and we want to try and spin it well, I think we'll lease or buy a handful of AW149s. It's the wrong helicopter for completely the wrong reason. We should be, I think, personally extending Puma out to 2035, replacing Puma and Merlin with a next generation rotorcraft, so either a Flara or a European designed fast helicopter. I don't think we should be condemning our troops to another 30 years of flying around 140 knots when the US are going to be flying around at nearly 300. So that's my personal opinion. So we've got about 4 minutes left, Mike, so I'm going to try and crack through them. Did you enjoy your time in Ireland? Any stories? Knowledge in this may be too sensitive. Ireland, beautiful. What a beautiful place. Glorious to fly around. I spent a lot of time in Northern Ireland when I was on a squadron. gorgeous to fly around, beautiful terrain. Always aware that there are people out there potentially with dushkas trying to shoot you, which is the weirdest thing. I got asked a funny story quickly. I got asked to go out about 3 o'clock in the morning to a bomb that had been found right near the border. So I flew a Chinook out there, landed next to the border, and the armament technical officer of the ATO said, "Can you fly this explosive back?" And I went, "What? You want me to fly this improvised bomb back in my aeroplane?" "Yeah." "How big is it?" He said, "It's about 3,000 pounds of improvised explosive." No, not really keen on putting 3,000 pounds of improvised explosive back in my aeroplane. Would you carry it underneath? Okay, so how far away is that cordon? I can't barely see because it's really dark. Oh, it's about 200 meters away. Well, I haven't got 200 meters of strop. That's 600 feet. Forget it. So I took the aeroplane back to Aldergrove. And about a week later, I saw him again. I said, "Did you ever get that explosive back?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "How'd you get it back?" He said, "It was simple, really. I just called up the barracks. I got a Gurkha and a 4-tonner. Gurkha turned up. He said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Take all that explosive back to the barracks." "Yes, sir." He just did. Brilliant. Gurkhas, fabulous people. Don't ever pick a fight with one. If you want to curry or go to war, go with Gurkhas. They're fabulous. Great answer so far. What is the worst kind of weather for flying the Chinook? Fog, wind, hot and high. Any close calls from weather? Yeah. Close calls from weather. Yes. I've had to do IF aborts. I've done inadvertent IMC aborts and planned IMC aborts out of high ground because of fog, dust, and extreme darkness are the two things that are dreadful. Degraded visual environment, we call it. The Chinook is well placed because of its design and its power to cope with it, and because we tend to have more power than a lot of legacy and other helicopters in hot and high conditions. But in hot and high conditions, the aircraft is still mortal. Any plans Chinook in UK? No. At the moment, there is There is a plan called a very outline plan called JMR H, which is heavy, but it's 15, 20, 30 years away at the moment. The US Army realised that the Chinook is one of the youngest aeroplanes it's got because the F model's almost brand new. So there's no plan. The RAF will be flying Chinooks till at least 2050, if not beyond. Ever had a malfunction emergency landing? Lots of minor malfunctions, a couple of diversions. I wouldn't call either of them really emergency landings. A couple of bird strikes. I put the aeroplane in the field, had a quick look, made sure it was fine and flew it on. Hello, chap. How are you, Anthony? It's a girly Chinook because she has baby Chinooks. We've flown to their own lines. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. It's very kind. Age 19 plus, brilliant. Glad you appreciate that, Tomcat. And you don't think behind you to my collection. Yeah, it's quite a lot. I've got a lot of badges on the ceiling as well. You probably like those as well. I'm really glad that the boys helped you in 2005. The one regret I've got is that I didn't really do a military aid to the civil power. I missed out on I left by the time we did the disaster relief in the Caribbean, and I was on the wrong squadron when Pakistan happened. But yeah, and obviously I'd left by the time we did Wally Bridge and all that sort of stuff. So it's wonderful. Have you ever flown over Whithorn in Southwest Gallery? I probably have on a TLT Nitex. Yeah, 46 is creepy. Yeah. Overlapping blades, simply because it's to keep the fuselage at a reasonable size. 67 Tomcat. You wait for the book; it'll all be in there. What else have we got? How often did you land on the rear two wheels? Yeah, I did that quite a lot. Did that in Kosovo. Only when I lifted off afterwards that I realised why the person next to me was going like that and pointing at me. I just thought he was in awe of how cool I was landing with two wheels on the side of the slope, troops getting out the back, until I realised both my rear wheels were in a minefield. Good. I think that is 8 o'clock, Mike. I'm happy to carry on for another couple of minutes, but I don't know how everybody else is. I think I've got through everybody's questions.
I think you did there, Foo. Yeah, what an incredible
Sorry, it's a bit
Q&A.
rushed towards the end. I'm sorry if anybody feels shortchanged at the end there.
No, absolutely not. What a great Q&A, and thank you very much for coming on, Foo. You'll need your brandy now, or your cognac, or whatever you're drinking.
I do.
Wet your whistle a bit there. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on, Foo. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's always great to have you on the channel, and thank you very much for all you guys coming in on the comments there with some great questions. And yeah, we're going to get Foo on again because he's an amazing guest. So thank you very much, Foo.
You're more than welcome. Hey, maybe all I would say is let's hope sometime maybe this year we can do something face-to-face, meet up somewhere with a few people that, rather than sit here and do it virtually, let's be in a bar or outside a beer garden somewhere or in a museum or something and just just chat stuff over a beer. That would be really nice, wouldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I've got plans, Foo, so don't worry. I'll be emailing you soon. So we'll sort something out, and you guys are going to love it. But I'll keep in contact, Foo. But thank you very much again, and enjoy your evening. And thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the questions. They're excellent. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.